San Francisco 49ers 24, Green Bay Packers 21.
In the rain.
A lot of rain. Big rain game here for the Niners.
It said the weather forecast was for, what was it, like light rain. That wasn't light.
No, it was off and on, but then it got real heavy when the Packers were trying to make their comeback
right at the worst time,
yeah,
for Green Bay's point of view.
It was a back and forth game, man. Niners were up 14-13. Packers come back, go up 24-14 with a touchdown and a 2-point conversion heading into the fourth quarter. Niners come back with a field goal to get within 4, and then Brock Purdy does lead the game-winning drive. Christian McCaffrey 6-yard touchdown with 1:11 left, put the Niners up for good. Game ends with a Jordan Love, Brett Favre-ian type of throwback across his body for a game-ending interception. It was a really good game. There are some Brock Purdy takes out there that are just all over the place because people just can't. I don't know. We'll talk about it. But what are your instant takeaways coming out of this one?
Best game of the weekend?
Chiefs-Bills was...
But that had a crappy ending.
It did.
This didn't. The ending wasn't good from Green Bay's point of view, but it was a good ending to the game in addition to being an amazing game all the way through.
No, this was really good.
I don't think the football was necessarily amazing quality top to bottom, but from this game was incredible.
I just like the drama. Even if it's good defense or it's bad offense or it's great, whatever it is, it's the drama.
And it's
not
like it was terrible football. It just wasn't, there have been better games from a fundamental football quality in the NFL, but this was a fantastic game that was tight, compelling, was a battle all the way through it, had key plays, had key almost plays, that could have swung the game and didn't. It was just a fantastic game, I thought. Do
you have a list of the Packers' missed opportunities? I have a list of a few.
Yeah,
key plays.
One guy basically almost got. You could argue one player on defense cost them this game. I wouldn't make it that strong, but it's not a great performance from him. But go back to the start. So last week, Green Bay won the toss, took the ball, and scored immediately against Dallas and put them in a hole, started the whole thing, and was a huge part of it. And we were saying, look, I've said all season long, a team needs to do that to San Francisco because I think that's the way you can knock that team off its game. Green Bay tried it. They won the toss again. They took the ball again. Again, just like last week, they had this giant – last week I think it was a 12-play drive before they scored the touchdown. This week it was a 14-play drive. They had to settle for a field goal. The next drive, they end up getting or on that drive, rather, they get a pass interference from Ambry Thomas that was a huge sort of extension. That was on 3rd and 6. Charvarius Ward has a pass breakup in the end zone,
great play,
which is a 4-point play. That was on 3rd down, was basically going to be in the guy's hands. That would have been your touchdown to open the game. Ward breaks it up, ends up having to settle for a field goal. So that's a 4-point defensive play by Charvarius Ward. Then on the 49ers' first drive, Darnell Savage drops a stone-cold interception right into his hands. That might have been a pick 6. That might have been the play. Right away, they had a chance to get the touchdown. Didn't get it because Ward breaks it up in the end zone, but it's still 3 points. Then they get an interception thrown right to Darnell Savage. Remember, he got one last week against Dallas. He got an amazing play, pick 6, huge part of that whole thing. Didn't get it. A bad read by Brock Purdy. They eventually get the stop, but that was a big play that could have broken their way. And then the next drive, Green Bay goes for it in 4th and 1 in the red zone, doesn't get it. So they were right on the cusp of that whole take the ball, score, put them in a hole, and they couldn't quite get it to the level where it would have, I think, really caused problems.
The 4th and 1 failure that you talked about, Packers, they do a hurry-up QB sneak on 4th and 1. They could have kicked a field goal to go up 6. We know in these games against as a 9+ point underdog, you probably don't want to just go up 6. You need to, need touchdowns here. Jordan Love QB sneak on the hurry up looked like a bad spot.
Yeah, it really did.
Looked like a bad spot. There were two bad spots
that was
on Love QB sneaks. The first one, they couldn't challenge it because it was probably just too risky, right? It wasn't clear enough, but it was probably a bad spot.
Yeah, I don't know.
The second one was clear, and they overturned it.
Right.
Later.
I don't know that they would have won that challenge, but it did look like a bad spot. The other interesting thing about that was it was a long one. A lot of times 4th and 1 can be anything from 4 inches to go, like where actually Jason Kelsey's got you the first down before you even snap the ball with this little, move the ball forward thing. Or it can be like 1.5 yards. This was more than a yard. It was a long one to go. Now, they still maybe got it and got screwed out of it by the tough spot of the ball. But still, I mean, that was sort of showing you how aggressive they were trying to be early in this game, taking the ball, trying to get it all, trying to make that thing. Because all the way through this game, they were flashing up those graphics of the things you say don't mean anything. Shanahan, what was he, 0-38, trailing by 8 or more going into the fourth quarter. They then modified that because they weren't going to get to 8. Turns out he was 0-30 before this game, trailing by 5 or more in the fourth quarter. That, again, is pretty crazy. It's the worst in the NFL, however difficult it is to win from those situations. And he ends up getting the win this time.
They did modify it. So he didn't get over the down 8 hump. Well, that stat's still live for us.
Right. You have to admit that is a more... It's the lower that number gets, the more compelling it becomes.
All I'm saying is if you're going to create an entire narrative around the offense can't come back, they can't play from a deficit or whatever that narrative might be, you have to include any time they've been down 5. Because Jimmy Garoppolo, in his career, is very good at fourth quarter comebacks. He has been very good. He's about 50% of the time they've won, which is high. There's 4 quarterbacks above 50 in NFL history. So Jimmy Garoppolo has been very good in fourth quarter comeback situations. That includes any comeback. So I don't remember them all specifically. So of course that's if they're down 3 or they're down 2 and they kick a game-winning field goal. That all counts.
Right.
But I'm sure some of them, there was a point where maybe they didn't enter the fourth quarter down 5, but at some point they were down at least a touchdown in the fourth quarter and still made the comeback. So that, if you're going to create an entire storyline around it, then include all of the opportunities, I guess, is my point.
But that is quite a large... It's not like this isn't a sample size problem. Like 30 is a pretty large number of, games where this has happened. They've gotten 0.
I get it.
Before this.
I understand. All I'm saying is if you're going to come to the conclusion that the offense just doesn't function when they're down in the fourth quarter, there were other games where they made plenty of fourth quarter comebacks, even if it was just for a game-winning field goal. Like, they still were able to do it, right? Either way, they ended up doing it. Brock Purdy in this game was just all over the place early on. Accuracy was all over the place. Started out the game with a glove. Yeah. Took off the glove.
So remember, the last game that Purdy played in the rain was against Cleveland earlier in the year, where the ball slipped out of his hand completely one time, just like gone. And he had a couple of other plays in there that were ugly. And I attributed to the wet conditions, to the rain. And we had an emailer or a listener argue with that and say, well, that's not true. Like, he's also, had other plays. I forget what his argument was, but basically saying it wasn't the conditions. The conditions were at least in his head enough that he came into this game wearing a glove that he doesn't normally wear. So he's like, I need the grip. And then dumped the glove during the game. And there's that one video out there of him being so in his own head that he's like wiping his hand mid-drop back with the ball in his left hand.
I couldn't believe that.
Right. As a tick, to be like, uh-oh, and then throws a ball that wasn't close to being completed. So, look, the conditions I don't think helped either quarterback, and I think both quarterbacks actually had far from their best game. I think you have to start saying the wet weather absolutely impacted Brock Purdy twice this season.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And again, they both had to play in it, but Purdy ended up making some huge plays in the end.
And by the way, the wet weather, I think absolutely contributed to the crazy Favrean game-losing throw that Jordan Love attempted at the end.
Yeah, I mean, look,
if that's dry, that ball probably lands a fair distance away from where it landed in this game.
It was a poor decision, obviously. Let's circle back to Love. I just wanted to talk Purdy a little bit long. Well, here's one thing that stood out to me. the run games in the playoffs generally, the running games have been good, and we're always pretty vocal here at PFF that it's a passing league, it's a pass first league, and I think a lot of the old adages that you need to run the ball in January type of thing are a little overblown, but I think there's some truth to it this year. I don't think you need to hashtag establish the run or anything like that, but you do need answers, and you rarely want to be one-dimensional as an offense. And I think the Packers ran the ball really well the last 2 weeks. That was a big part of their win against the Cowboys. They ran the ball really well in this game as well. But the Niners also ran the ball well. The Chiefs and the Bills ran the ball well. The Lions did. I mean, there's a lot of teams, and we talked about the Ravens with over 200 yards. The run games have been massive in the playoffs so far. But it wasn't a lot of times at the end of the day, and the reason why the rushing stats are always, people are, if you win the rushing battle, you're going to win, and they, conflate those things. It's been the losing teams have run the ball extremely well too, but I think they've needed it. The Packers' offense down the stretch here with Aaron Jones since he came back from injury has been outstanding.
Aaron Jones has looked amazing.
He's been incredible. He had a 53-yard. I mean, there was a point where the Packers were completely backed up. He flips the field with a 53-yarder. The Packers, in between the 20s, did almost everything that they could. It was red zone. It was missed field goal. I mean, it was little things added up for the Packers, but the offense was moving the ball. Aaron Jones was a big part of it. And again, from a San Francisco standpoint, Christian McCaffrey, 39-yard touchdown, 2 total touchdowns. Really nice job by the Niners on the ground as well.
Yeah, McCaffrey was fantastic again. Some bad Green Bay tackling on McCaffrey's touchdowns. Both of them featured a tackle. Neither one of them should have been scored because a guy had him lined up one-on-one and missed the tackle. So we said before, the first Green Bay drive on defense, Darnell Savage drops an interception. Darnell Savage also misses a one-on-one tackle with Christian McCaffrey not even in the hole, just at the second level. His first touchdown, the long one, Savage is coming downhill. He's got him lined up one-on-one, completely misses a tackle. McCaffrey then sidesteps another guy, and he's gone for the touchdown. So Darnell Savage in this game has a dropped interception on the first drive that could have been a pick six. He has a one-on-one missed tackle on Christian McCaffrey that ends up in a touchdown, and he gets beaten one-on-one by George Kittle on a play that becomes a touchdown.
You're just going to blame it all on Darnell Savage.
I'm just saying that if you're going to make 3 mistakes, it's almost impossible to create higher leverage mistakes than those 3. That's touchdown, and could have been defensive touchdown that you left on the board.
Oh, the what ifs are
If you're going to screw
rough.
up 3 times, I don't know that it's possible to screw up 3 times that would have made a bigger impact than those 3.
The what ifs are so rough when you come out of a playoff loss like that. The Packers in particular, they were spamming toss sweep over and over in this game. And I didn't tweet out the stats to everybody, but somebody had asked, or I tweeted out generally what we call same side puller. Any plays where there's a puller to the front side of the play, that's like a toss sweep. That's the old pin and pull on an outside zone play. That is the highest yards per carry play in the NFL over the last 4 years. I mean, I just checked 4 years, but historically that's the best play. It's one of those things where you don't just take that data and run it over and over again, but the Packers kind of were. The Niners didn't have answers for it. It's an interesting play when you look at the data because the yards before contact, as in like the scheme, isn't the best, but the running back breaks the most tackle. They create the most after contact. So essentially you're putting the running back out in space with blockers,
right,
and it puts them in position to break tackles and create more big plays, and the Packers were spamming that over and over again, having a lot of success against the Niners.
I didn't tweet this out when they sort of announced it pre-game, but I was thinking it. It's actually a good thing that the Packers are without A.J. Dillon in this game, because can you imagine if they'd given Dillon just 12, if they just split the workload 50-50? Those are plays that are objectively worse, not having Aaron Jones carry the ball by making that split workload. Instead, you get Aaron Jones carrying the load, and then you get a couple plays here or there with Emmanuel Wilson where it's like, okay, Aaron Jones needs a breather for a second. But, AJ, whatever you think about Dillon, it wouldn't have helped, I don't think, them having him in there. Aaron Jones was fantastic, and leaning on him as the alpha running back in the backfield was a big thing for Green Bay.
A couple other key points in this game, because I want to talk about Purdy and Love, because I think Purdy and Love kind of just switched. Purdy was inconsistent, I think, throughout most of the game, but he made a lot of big throws in the second half. Love had that one spectacular throw where he scrambled and just throws a laser along the left sideline, which was unreal. But Love's accuracy started to disappear in the second half. But at the end of the first half, the Kyle Shanahan, game situation, clock control, they were playing for a field goal. They were very conservative before the half. Just the game management, again, maybe comes back to bite Kyle Shanahan and the Niners. They were playing conservative, playing for the field goal, missed the field goal, settled for a long field goal. There was just close to 50, I think. With this offense and those playmakers, probably should be a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah. Jordan Love was interesting because he was better in the first half than the second half, and maybe that was a weather thing. But he also wasn't as dialed in. He wasn't as perfect as he'd been the last sort of few weeks, where he'd looked like he'd hit this level and was just playing at this incredible. There were more misses in there, and it started to look a little bit more like earlier in the season, where it was flashes of brilliance and some really high-end stuff, but then you'd get a play here or there where you're just like, why was that so far off? The ball location was off. And again, I don't know how much of this was the weather. Maybe all of it was. But it certainly wasn't quite, it wasn't the Jordan Love from last week where you're like, oh, he's dialed in. Every pass he hits is going to be dead on, and that's a really difficult thing to stop. It's like he's missing a few. And even if it's just bad ball location, it's enough that it's giving opportunities to the San Francisco defense, and that may come back to bite them later on. And it did. The other play I think that we have to talk about is a massive swing. The Packers get this incredible kick return by Keyshawn Nixon,
yes,
who then fumbles the ball in the tackle, and then Eric Wilson, trailing it from behind, dives on it and saves a turnover. Incredible play by him. Incredible play by Nixon right up until fumbling, which ended up being like, you need to credit him for the return because they ended up with great field position because Wilson saved it. But that was a wild play.
Elite fumble recovery.
And they got a touchdown on that drive, so it was a big play across the board.
All these plays are just so magnified, and I think the Bills-Chiefs game, it mattered a lot. In this game, though, Jordan Love's first interception. You've got the Packers are up 21-14. It's 3rd and 11. But when you're up 7 against the Niners, this was the chance. This is what you were saying. Like, the Packers had a chance to put them in this hole. Late third quarter to drive down. If they just kick a field goal, they're up 10. Pretty much heading into the fourth quarter, the thing that the Shanahan-led teams have never been able to come back from. Jordan Love misses the short throw underneath, gets tipped up, and it's intercepted by Drake Greenlaw, who had a huge game for the Niners.
And that was a perfect example of, like, it was just off. Like, he wasn't missing those the last couple of weeks. And then he comes in and the ball it's not even close. It's like a yard behind the tight end. Tight end can only just get his fingers to it.
Missed him by a mile.
Which is why it ends up getting popped right up into the air into Greenlaw's hands.
Those are interesting plays because they're not necessarily turnover worthy. He didn't make a decision. He didn't throw a pass that like really should have been intercepted. He just missed an open throw. And it just happened to get tipped up right to Greenlaw. That thing doesn't necessarily get picked off most of the time. But again, Packers were dropping interceptions. Niners have this one. Nice play by Drake Greenlaw, but that thing gets tipped up, almost to him, or at least where he's going. That flips the field for the Niners, gets them a field goal to get back within 4, and eventually sets up, gives them the opportunity for their game-winning touchdown drive. So that play was huge at the end of the third quarter because at the other part of this, ends up becoming like probably 40 yards of field position. Even if they miss the third down, they're probably going to punt, put the Niners back. Instead, the Niners get the ball at midfield. But yeah, that was, to me, that was the story of Love's second half. I think more of his misses were in the second half. He was off, and then, of course, he has the cross-body miss.
Right.
Cross-body interception to end the game.
Second half was worse, and I think the rain was worse in the second half. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know how much of this was purely conditions, wet football, all that kind of stuff. Maybe all of it was. But the reality is Jordan Love was worse than he's been the last few weeks. And in particular, that manifests itself with accuracy. Plays like that, where he misses Tucker Kraft over the middle by like 2 yards almost. I mean, Kraft is a giant human being who can only just contort himself backwards and get one hand to this pass that is supposed to be like at face level as he runs across the middle of the field, wide open, by the way.
There was a point, like up until that point, didn't it just feel like the rain was affecting the Niners way more? They were slipping all over the place.
Yeah.
The broadcast was they were making a big deal of you've got like 6 pairs of cleats and screw-ins to choose from, and it's amazing to me. By the way, there are people dedicated on the team to study the play, and they're at home, but study the playing surface, to know the right cleats, to know all these things and prepare the players. I mean, the Niners looked unprepared.
It also blows my mind that is left up to players to an extent. Like,
I think you're giving them the information, and they have to, play around with it and see what feels good. But the Niners were slipping all over the place.
It feels like there's certain conditions where you just say, okay, you may have a choice, but your choice is between these 2 things, not this over here. Like, this is not an option today. Don't even think about it. And yet instead it's like, well, the surface is slippy. The rain is what it is. Make your choice, however bad it is. And it's only later in the game, like, for the love of God, take off these ones and put on the giant cleats that are actually going to give you some chance of gripping.
That was remember how bad the Super Bowl was last year with the Eagles and Chiefs?
I mean,
it's slipping all over the place.
It's basically any game on grass in weather.
Players want grass, but it leads to some ugly products sometimes, just saying. Let's talk Brock Purdy a little bit. Again, I think the rain story was related to Purdy more, and you're rightfully saying, look, it affects both teams. It affects both quarterbacks. It affected Jordan Love. But Purdy was more visibly shaken, it seemed, by the rain. I mean, he was just all over the place. Not just it wasn't bad decisions necessarily, the Savage one maybe, but just missing a lot of open throws in this one. But in crunch time, man, 4th quarter, he throws just a ridiculous Nick Mullins-esque up and away from coverage to Juwan Jennings in the middle of the field. Great throw there. By the way, I mean, there's just so much to talk about here. Deebo Samuel getting hurt, too. We have to discuss. Shoulder injury early on.
Which may impact next week.
And Deebo has been we know the on-off splits with Deebo, but it's true for a lot of these players. And it's not always, predictive or whatever. But we know that Deebo Samuel makes this thing tick, right?
Yeah.
To a point. I mean, he creates mismatches. He's outstanding.
I mean, he was missing previously, and that's when their 3-game losing skid happened.
Right. So him missing time. So you got Juwan Jennings. You have Chris Conley getting reps. Former Chiefs legend, big speedy receiver who had a 17-yard. It was a great route, 17-yard timing deep out by Brock Purdy. But yeah, Purdy started making some of those throws down the stretch. Leads the game-winning drive. I think he was 5 for 6. The one was a drop by George Kittle, which could have been a big drop. And the Niners just bounced back from it, and Purdy leads the game-winning drive. So overall, I don't think Brock Purdy played a very good game. The grade won't be great. Something to being able to do that in crunch time and stepping up when he was needed, though.
It is interesting how thin this 49ers group of playmakers is, even though it's amazing. So, you list off the players you have to try and match up with to stop this offense, and it's McCaffrey, it's Kittle, it's Ayuk, it's Deebo Samuel, Kyle Juszczyk. But an injury to any one of them changes everything, which is fascinating because as soon as one guy goes down, Deebo's done. Now you've got Juwan Jennings getting 31 snaps, receiving snaps. Now, Jennings had a great game, but I think that's a massive drop-off generally. And
Juwan Jennings is really good, though.
It leads to Ray McLeod and Chris Conley each getting 16 passing or receiving reps in this game. Like, that's a huge, it's every time one of those guys getting a target. And as you said, the Conley catch, the Conley target catch, first down, great play. But you're like, how are we that close from getting Chris Conley being an integral part of this passing offense?
I mean, Juwan Jennings is a good next option for the Niners. But it's kind of like with Miami. If Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle go down and it's like, hey, we got River Craycraft coming out there and making plays here. Chris Conley and Ray McLeod.
So the other thing, late in the game, one of the the things that had happened over the last few weeks is right up at the point where everyone had gone, Joe Barry's defense is garbage. It's time to fire Joe Barry. The defense played amazing from that point on. One of the biggest criticisms of his defense this season has been not necessarily that it's just been bad across the board, but it's at the most critical moments, it gets way too soft. And they back up and they get passive and they just let the offense move the ball. Like at the crunch time, that's when the defense just gets weak, gets soft, and they did it again. The close game, it's tight, everything's where it is. What's the actual score at this point? Green Bay is 21-17 up, and San Francisco gets the ball in the fourth quarter with 6 minutes left, and the defense just got so passive at that point. They didn't come after him. They backed off. They just let them have that drive, and it was painstaking. They got three third downs in that drive, scored on the final one, and eventually the 49ers took almost all the time off the clock, got the touchdown to Christian McCaffrey, and now you've got a minute left with Jordan Love to try and answer in the rain. It's like if you had just gotten aggressive against an offense that wasn't all right, that Purdy was in his own head with the rain, like if you just stuck to your guns and really came after him on that drive, even if they score, like what's the worst that could happen, right? There's 6 minutes left. I would rather you get too aggressive, they score, and now you've got 5 minutes or 4 minutes to answer instead of we're going to be passive, we're going to let them take the entire time off the clock, and now we can't answer because there's only a minute left.
They went, I'm looking at the coverage breakdown, cover 4, so quarters, which is off coverage, like you're saying, a little softer. Quarters, cover 6 or cover 3 on every one of those dropbacks, except there was the 3rd and 5, and this was a huge conversion here. 3rd and 5, slant to Brandon Ayuk. That was the one snap of man coverage that they played on that drive.
Right.
But Purdy stuck it in there, down and away from coverage. Ayuk did a great job making the play against Nixon. But yeah, you're right. It was maybe too easy. But look, coming out of this game, you have the guy from The Athletic writing that I just don't understand. I get the points he was trying to make, except is it David Lombardi? Maybe?
It's, yeah.
From The Athletic.
Right.
It was basically like this is a tough night for Brock Purdy doubters.
Isn't that guy supposed to be some kind of troll? I mean, not like a professional one.
I think I saw him do the same thing, like week 3, that Giants game where the first 2 passes for Purdy were thrown right to the defense. There's
one 49ers guy that everybody says.
No, it's a different guy that does the troll stuff.
No, but not for fun, but like
there's someone else.
He's just that bad.
There's someone else. I think Lombardi is just like a strong Purdy believer.
Okay.
So he's looking for any way to be like, well, Purdy must be Montana.
Sure.
I mean, it's okay. And look, I think there's something to you don't have your best stuff and the game's on the line and you go and get the job done. I think there is something to that. I think if you're trying to predict Brock Purdy's future, the ability for him in a bad game, in bad conditions, to step up when needed and play better in the fourth quarter than he did the rest of the game, which, by the way, was the opposite of how Purdy had been operating for a lot of his career. I think there's something to that. But for the conclusion to be like, man, Brock Purdy doubters, rough night for you, it's like, no, it was Mina, I thought, summed it up perfectly. She was like, this is a perfect night for everybody. If you're a Brock Purdy doubter, you're like, dude, can't even throw in the rain. Dude's terrible. If you're a Brock Purdy believer, you're like, man, ice water in his veins. Look at that. Comes out at the end. I mean, that's the truth. That was the reality of this game. It was not Brock Purdy's best game, but made some big plays down the stretch. And we'll still wait until we declare him Joe Montana. But I do think there's something to that. And I think the point, if the Lombardi guy was not so declarative in his statement that it's like, oh, you haters, rough night for the haters. And he just said there are some similarities, because he was trying to say there's some similarities when Joe Montana had the catch and he made all these plays. It wasn't always the best game, right? And that was what made Montana and a Brady, like that's what made those guys special. It didn't matter. Like, you may have caught them on their worst day, but if the game's close at the end, those guys are going to lead a comeback. Yeah. Like there's something to that. I agree. But you can't look at this entire body of work and be like, yeah, Brock Purdy, great game.
No. Yeah, Dan in the chat says Grant Cohn is the guy I was thinking of.
Grant Cohn, yeah, that's who you're thinking of.
Yeah. No, like when we did that Montana versus Young sort of podcast thing, one of the things that jumped out the most from going back watching all these crazy old games in the 80s and diving into Joe Montana lore and history and all that kind of stuff was just how many games where his signature comeback, his signature drive to end, like to build up his legacy began, after Joe had already thrown 2 interceptions and we were down, 21 points. That was like the setup, you know what I mean? And then Joe goes to work and we make the play and he executes the comeback. And that's what made, Ronnie Lott would die for that guy and all these kinds of things. It's like, but we forget about the first part. Like he had the Andrew Luck thing. Like he gets credit for putting out the fire that he started in the first place. Like Montana did a lot of that as well. We just don't remember it because it happened in the late 1980s where there was barely the television coverage and that kind of thing. Now it's everywhere, so it's easier to be obvious. Also, people like PFF exist quantifying every one of these plays, and now, the nerds with their data, there's play-by-play and everything in a way there wasn't back in the 80s where you just had, he won. Now it's like, well, yeah, but look at the EPA and look at it shows you everything.
Look, like I said, there's something to it. And as always, I'm just like dead smack in the middle of the analysis. Wasn't Brock Purdy's best game, and I thought it was an impressive final drive.
Before we need to get into the weeds a bit, you'll love this because it's special teams. So there was Irish representation in this game. Daniel Whelan, who was the first Irishman to play in the NFL since the 80s or something, right? Now, spare a thought for the people in Ireland staying up to watch this game, to watch Daniel Whelan punt his way to glory. He didn't attempt to kick until like the fourth quarter, and I think he already had 1 punt in the game. But early in the game, there was a bad long snap, and Daniel Whelan does a great job to pick it up off the floor and then get it set, kick. Great job, right? Late in the game, Anders Carlson misses a kick that was pretty big in the outcome. If you look at the hold in that kick, it didn't look good. It was the ball's like tilted all the way forward. It's not like, the perfect ball up, spin it forward.
I've noticed the ball being tilted forward more.
Yeah, but this looked like this did not look like a design tilted forward thing. This looked like not a great hold. So
the missed kick had an opportunity to put the Packers up 7 instead of 4, which would have been
so we've gone. Whelan had one early in the game where he maybe saved the kick by rescuing the bad punt or the bad snap. He also had this one where it looked like he may have also. The kicker gets all the blame when the kick is bad, right? Unless the holder makes complete and obvious balls of the hold. It's like, that one was on the holder. But if it's just the balls in front of the kicker, nobody really pays attention to how the hold is. It's just the kicker shanked another one. Time to get rid of that guy. And by the way, the Matt LaFleur comment on Anders Carlson was insane.
It was.
They just casually dropped during the broadcast that, we asked Matt LaFleur about his kicker, and he said, you know what? Every time he goes out to kick, I just pray. Excuse me? You tell me that your reaction when your kicker goes out to attempt points is, I just close my eyes and pray that he makes it. And you said that out loud to people.
Now, I don't know what the baseline is there for Matt LaFleur. Maybe he's just that's how he handles all kickers.
That's
with
even
prayer.
But even if it's not the fact. I would imagine a lot of coaches treat their kickers that way. Like just let's come on. But to say that out loud to journalists, knowing that that's probably going to get repeated on a national broadcast, is
at a position
wild.
Where the mentality is so fragile,
right,
for kickers.
That is crazy. That's one of the most insane things I can remember a head coach ever saying out loud in front of journalists.
Matt LaFleur. Anyway, let's put a bow on the Packers season since it's 8:00. Good season, man. The future.
Yeah.
The future's bright.
So much. I mean, much further ahead than they were expected to be. For them to be in the playoffs, for them to take it to the 49ers. And honestly, I think you can make a pretty strong argument they were the better team in this game and should have won it, and their mistakes cost them the game more than the 49ers rescuing the game from them. I think they could and maybe should have won this game and didn't. For that to be the reality of this team with a first-time starter in Jordan Love and a group of wide receivers that are all first and second-year guys, is crazy.
And it was different receivers stepping up every single week. Romeo Doubs was great these last couple weeks in the playoffs, whether it's Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, Christian Watson, Aaron Jones running the ball, still looking good. The Jordan Love's development this year should have Packers fans obviously really excited, even though this wasn't his best game, not the way you would want to finish it. But they were a 7 seed, probably the best 7 seed that we've seen because of how hot they were going into the playoffs. So Packers have a lot to be excited about. I think the NFC North is about to get wild because we know that the Lions are going to the NFC Championship. We'll talk about them in a minute here. The Bears are probably about to draft Caleb Williams, and the Vikings are always very, very competitive, and I think they've done a nice job in Minnesota as well, putting that roster together and building for the future there. So it's going to be a competitive NFC North. Packers fans should be pretty excited about the future and what they were able to accomplish this season.
Mm-hmm. Just a moment on that last, the Favrean play. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was 1st and 10, aside from anything else. There's like a minute left on the clock. It's 1st and 10. He gets forced out of the pocket, kind of. I mean,
I made a statement earlier on the podcast that if I read the comments, somebody's like, "Steve, you're an idiot. Why would you say this?" I said throwing a game-ending interception isn't the worst thing in the world, and I meant it through the lens of if you need a touchdown to win, and what the end of the game, it doesn't matter if the game ends on 4th down on an incompletion or if it ends on an interception. Either way, you have your chances of winning are slim, and you might have to take some chances. It was actually about Jordan Love, and maybe it was the Pittsburgh game. The game ended on an interception when they just had to force a throw or whatever. This is different, where they needed a field goal to tie, so you could play both sides, right? That actually puts the defense in a bind, right? You don't want to give up the game-ending touchdown, but you also, you don't want them to get into field goal range either. You don't want to go to overtime. The offense can kind of dictate their terms there, take the underneath stuff if they need to, take shots when they have opportunities. This was a very poor decision. This was a bad way to end the football game.
Yeah, in his defense. So actually Hargrave is, from his perspective, Hargrave is forcing him well out of the pocket. He's got to run. So at the point he runs, there isn't much on. Like you look at the receivers on the play when he's forced out of the pocket to his right, they're all running deep. They're all covered. And there's basically nothing on. The one he attempts, if you're going to try a pass at that point, the one he attempts is the only one you could even think about. The thing is, though, it's 1st and 10. The play's dead. Get rid of it. You're forced out of the pocket. If you just throw that away, it's 2nd and 10, and you do over. Why? The pass he attempted was never on, and certainly not from the dynamics he was attempting it from. Just a horrible, horrible decision. Again, it was so similar to that Brett Favre 2009 Vikings NFC Championship game that a lot of people drew up side by side. The Favre one, it wasn't as far, but it was the same thing in terms of you don't need to make that pass at that point. Favre's running to the right field. He's got open real estate in front of him. He can pick up most of the 1st down by just hobbling his way to the sideline. Don't attempt the pass. This was similar. You got out of the pocket. You're not going to take a sack. You have enough time before Nick Bosa closes you down. Just throw it out. Throw it away.
I think that's one of the next steps in Jordan Love's development, right? We're so impressed because some of the throws he made this year were just out of this world. And when he was on, the confidence that he played with, and this is a confident throw, ill-advised confidence on this throw here, but the confidence that he played with and then executed with was so impressive the second half of the season, Jordan Love. But now it's going to be, I think, about situational football and knowing when to rely on special arm, special throws, live to play another day. That is another down. That is, I think, the next step for Jordan Love here is a little more situational football, situational awareness. Even early in the season when I think, was it a game-ending interception against the Raiders as well? It just felt like the shot plays were coming at the wrong times for Jordan Love at various points in the season. This is an example of that. So I think that's going to be a big part of the learning experience. Incredibly impressed with what Love did this year and the tools and the actual execution of some of the throws that he made. Now it's going to be about making them at the right time, I think, going forward.